Cretons. That's what we're doing today. It's a Quebecois meat spread. First off, I'm gonna apron up. Don't want to get dirty. So, it's a pretty simple recipe. All you need is pork, you need onions, garlic, spices, milk, and a little bit of bread, preferably like a cheap white bread, but you can also use breadcrumbs or like any bread you have on hand. Is that because the flavor of the bread's not so important, you're gonna care more about what the texture that the bread brings. So that's why I like use a bread that you don't really mind too much running low on. So this is trying to make it easy to see what I'm doing, but I don't have the best setup. But I think this is gonna be clear enough. You can see everything I'm doing as long as I don't lean too much and create a bunch of shadow. But it's gonna be okay. First off, get your coats off the counter. Get your shallots. I don't have any onions, so I'm using shallots. So you want pretty small because you don't really want the texture of the shallots in there or of the garlic. So mince them any way you know how. You don't have to be fussy about it. So, as far as I know, this recipe is a recipe basically to help kind of get the most out of your limited quantities of meat and to preserve it for as long as possible. Kind of like potted meat or things like that. And it's like doing a pâté or a terrine or things like that. But in this case, instead of making it like something really smooth, it's kind of chunky, and you make it with ground meat. And what's important about this is that you use fat that is solid, cold or at room temp. That's the kind of important, because you want always be careful when you cut. But you want to use a fat that's solid at room temp, because you want to for it to kind of congeal and help seal the meat inside, so that it doesn't get exposed to the elements, so that your meat can last for longer. So back in the day, you could use clarified butter, lard, things like that, like really like clean fats with no nothing extra in there. That way it doesn't go rancid. But now with refrigeration and things like that, it's not as necessary. So a lot of people don't do they won't cover their croton with a layer of lard or clarified butter, but that's one way to do it. But you still ideally want your fat of choice to be solid, because you want the texture at the end to be like kind of spreadable and a little bit thick. You'll see what I mean when you see the end result. So dropped a piece of onion on the floor. Bench scraper, always a very useful tool. So I did about for this much ground pork, I'm doing about 1 medium onion or half of a large onion's worth of shallots. You can also use an onion, obviously. And garlic, just an arbitrary amount. I'm not too sure exactly how I decided how much I wanted. I just kind of did it by eye, like in relation to how much shallots I have in here. Same thing as the shallots, you want to very like briefly mince your garlic, but make it small so that you don't have super big chunks in there. But once again, it doesn't matter because it'll cook down a little bit. So the best way is you make lines, and then after you make lines, you cut through the lines. Because shallots have layers, it'll work properly, and because you're basically, it's already separated into 3 dimensions. One dimension is already separated itself by the actual shape of the shallot, and then the 2 other dimensions, you're the one who's doing it through your slices. As for garlic, garlic is small enough that you don't really need to cut in 3 dimensions, but if you did have pretty large garlic cloves, I guess you could do your slices like this, and then do a slice down the middle like this, and cut through. So you once again have your 3 dimensions to make tiny cubes. But this is like a home style recipe. You don't need to be too like fussy with how you cut. Plus, even if you weren't cooking for this, you weren't cooking this at home, like most people that I know that make this, which is not a lot, because most people don't do traditional Quebec food, but most people that do this, they pass it through a food processor afterwards, like a blender, to make it smooth. I kind of like the small chunks, so I'm not going to, but you definitely can if you want to. You can do it with any type of ground meat you want. I'm using ground pork because that's the traditional way, and it's the flavor that I know and prefer. And I believe if you do it with other meats, it's called a cretonade, because creton is specifically with pork. So if you're doing it with another meat, it's called cretonade because it's the technique of making something into something similar to creton. So it's cretonade. I don't know if there's an equivalent term in English for this. I don't know if there's an equivalent British or American version of this food. But all I know is that it's a Quebec food called Creton, and it's basically like you could almost say like a poor man's pâté, because it's not as smooth, it's not as nice, and it's made with what they had on hand. So usually they didn't even have any what do you call it? They didn't even have alcohol with them, because I think as far as I know, pâté, you put a little bit of alcohol. You could put alcohol in this. So I have my alliums, I have my pork. What else do we need? Black pepper, salt. I don't have any cheap white bread, and I don't have any breadcrumbs. What I do have is panko, so we're gonna use panko. And then the most important is the spices. So you want the, can you see me right here? You want the traditional kind of Quebec spice flavor profile, which if you've seen my ragout de pâte video, you would know it's stuff like cloves, like cinnamon, like Jamaica pepper, which is known as allspice, but I don't have Jamaica pepper. However, I do have a very traditional spice mix that has Jamaica pepper in it, so that's what I'm going to use, which is called 4-spice, and 4-spice is the kind of classic colonial spices that you expect to find in these kinds of recipes. So let's see. I'll find my 4-spice one day. And I just need to find my 4-spice, which might be right here. Nope. Here they are. Alright, so I have all my spices. It's the classic, you know them well, I know them well, colonial spices. Nutmeg, dried ground ginger, 4-spice, which contains allspice, ginger, cloves, and Usually cinnamon, cloves, very strong, be careful. So what I'm gonna do is, I want to get everything ready in advance, but there's some stuff you can do concurrently to go faster. So I'm going to grind my spices, but while I do that, I'm gonna cook my start cooking my alliums. You just want to sweat them, as you can see in the pan over here. I'm gonna add lard because this is pork fat. Lard is pork fat, so you're gonna cook this in pork fat, and lard is slightly solid. Well, slightly solid. It's actually pretty solid at room temp and in cold temperatures. That's what you. That's what you want. You want that. See how solid it is, and that's like fridge cold, but at room temp it's also semi-solid. So you want to start with lard, and you're gonna cook in lard because basically all the lard that's in here, it doesn't disappear, right? Like, so once your dish cools down, all the lard is going to recongeal, and it'll hold everything together. But you also have to keep in mind there's lard in your ground pork, and we're gonna introduce fat in other ways too, like through milk, and we're gonna also add like binding ability through the breadcrumbs and through the fat that's in the milk. So we're gonna start with this much lard. It's a lot, but it is a recipe where you kind of do want a lot of lard, and you want to sweat your thing, so you don't want to bring color, so it's gonna go to like a medium heat. So I'll let you know, but otherwise we're gonna go back to our setup over here. I'm just gonna try to make it nice. So we have a setup over here where I'm creating a bunch of shadows and whatever, but it's okay. And we're going to grind our spices. So the spices that I deem the most important for this, usually when I eat, what I really taste mostly is going to be the Jamaica pepper, the nutmeg, and the cloves. But cloves are a very strong flavor, so you have to be careful. I'm only gonna put a few cloves because I'm not making that much creton. I'm doing a few cloves. I'm doing a little bit of black pepper. Doing some allspice, ginger. Basically, I'm putting everything in here so that it all kind of becomes uniform. A little bit of cinnamon. I'm putting everything in here so that it becomes slightly uniform, but the goal is going to be to start with my kind of pre-made colonial spice mix over here, and I'm going to grate my nutmeg in here. Nutmeg is pretty strong, so you don't need to put too much, and you can always adjust afterwards. So I did sort of my mix in here. We're going to grind it, and when we're going to be doing the creton later, we're going to taste it. And of course it doesn't taste the same when it's warm, because when it's warm, you don't perceive the spices as much. You perceive mostly the pork and the warm fat. So you have to keep in mind that once the creton cool down, you'll perceive the saltiness a lot more, and you'll perceive the saltiness and the sweetness differently. I'm pretty sure I might be mixing the sweetness and the saltiness, but you'll taste. I feel like you tend to taste the saltiness more when stuff is cold, and you'll taste the spices a lot more. So it's better to taste a lot while you're making it, and it to be slightly feel like it's under seasoned when warm, because when you're gonna have it cold, the spice is gonna be much stronger. So if you make it perfectly seasoned when it's warm, it might be over seasoned when cold, because it's meant to be eaten cold, like pate. My pork fat is rendering, so I'm gonna add my aromatics, and I don't know if you can hear this, But you just want the lightest, gentlest little sizzle. You don't want a harsh sizzle because you just want to sweat the vegetable. And in this case, you know, sweating the vegetables means you want to cook them, let them release their moisture, but you don't want to caramelize the sugars and the proteins. You don't want any Maillard reaction, no caramelization. You know, that's how you know it's like based on French food, because in a lot of French recipes, you know, they don't brown their stuff, they sweat them. So our spice mix is done. It smells very good. It smells very strongly of cloves and nutmeg, so I'm gonna have to adjust a little bit, but it should be fine. I like this combination. But of course, if you have allspice at home, I would say if you want to do it the way I usually have it, a little bit more allspice than everything else, and a little bit more cloves than everything else. The rest is up to personal preference. So now it's just a matter of cooking the thing. So it's really not crazy. Like, this is a really, really simple recipe with really simple ingredients. So I recommend you do it at home. If you have the spices, of course, but any spice will work. Like, if you don't have all the spices that I used, like I said, cloves and allspice are like the most important, I would say, with a little bit of like cinnamon or ginger. And I find, like, you know, because those are like poor people's spices, they're all like pretty available everywhere around the world, I think, or at least in North America and in Europe, as far as I know. You know, they're not like super complicated ingredients. Like, no, I'm not gonna be like, oh yeah, get these like specific Sichuan ingredients or get these like specific Japanese ingredients. You know, I think if you live in the Western world or in the Northern world, these spices are pretty easy to come across. And you know, I think nutmeg's a bit expensive, but apart from that, like, all the other spices that I have here, like ground ginger, cloves, cinnamon, those tend to be Jamaica pepper, aka allspice. Those tend to be pretty easily found. Ground pork is easy to find and it's pretty cheap. You can use ground chicken, you can use ground beef, any ground meat you want. Ground lamb would probably be really good. If you do it with ground lamb, and maybe I'd add a little bit of cumin. I think cumin goes really great with lamb. And of course, you know, use onion. If you have onion, I use shallots because I have shallots at home. I'm not gonna buy an onion just to do this. You know, use what you have. Usually I always have garlic and I always have shallots, so that's what I used. If you always have garlic and onions at home, use garlic and onions. That's actually more legit than what I'm doing. And as far as, like, you can do it with milk, you can do it with water. I'm gonna do it with milk. It's gonna bring more fat, it's gonna bring more unctuousness to it. Any milk is fine. You can use water. As soon as this gets transparent and fragrant, you're gonna add your pork. So right now, it smells super meaty because of the onions and the shallots and the lard. It smells super meaty. Now we're gonna add the lard, the ground pork, and we're gonna break it apart. We want it like really fine pieces, but you don't have to go too crazy with it, because either you can add it to the food processor afterwards, or you can just leave it as is. I like to leave it as is and have a little bit of chunks. So now you just want to break in the pork and break in the pork, cook it down, and as soon as the pork is thoroughly cooked but not browned, once again, just sweating, you want to add water and your you want to add your spices, bloom them in the fat a little bit, just enough to really bring out the aroma of the spices. And then as soon as your you know, your spices have been in the fat for a little bit, you add your liquid. So in this case, I'm gonna add milk. If you have cream, that's even better. Well, even better. It's gonna be even more unctuous. So you know, you make it as fatty as you want, but if you make it too fatty, then I find that it becomes a bit heavy to eat. Like, it's pretty strong. Like, of course, eat this on bread, and bread with fatty stuff is delicious. But you know, it's the kind of thing where I find that, you know, because I tend to eat this on the side with something else. Like, I'm gonna eat bread with Cretons and like eggs, or bread with Cretons with, like, you know, breakfast foods, or breads with Cretons with like salad and other, you know, charcuteries or meats or things like that, or and fruits. Like, if your Creton's too fatty, then it can kind of overwhelm the rest of your dish, because like you don't want to eat anything except your Creton and your bread, because otherwise you'll just get sick because it's like too much fat and too much food. So, you know, if you really want to make Creton and only eat Creton with bread and like sustain yourself through that, like you can make it really fatty if you want, but I tend to enjoy my Creton with other things, so I'm gonna do it not too heavy. You could also add pork stock or chicken stock to this, and as it reduces, it'll develop the gelatin in the stock, so it'll help it set even more. But I think just the Creton, just milk or water, and the fat of the pork and the gelatin that's in this pork that's going to come out as you cook it, I think that's enough. I don't think you need much more than that. So you just want to cook it down until it loses all its pink color, and once it loses all its pink color, you add your spices, bloom them a little bit, add liquid, let it reduce, add a little bit more liquid, let it reduce, and you're good to go, really. It's a really simple thing to do. You know, you don't want to develop color. I'm sure it'd be delicious with colored, like nice caramelized onions and shallots with like nice caramelized meat, and then like you add your milk and you cook it in the milk and you add your spices. But I think, you know, the fact that you, by keeping the meat not colored, by keeping it you know, like this, and by not caramelizing your vegetables too much, you get a certain like unctuousness and like creaminess where the fat really like blends with the meat, and I think it makes for a really pleasant mouth experience. And while I do think it would be really delicious with browned elements in here, I think it might feel like kind of a little bit more dry stuff suspended in fat, and not the kind of uniform creamy meat in creamy fat texture that would be typical of Creton. If you have a potato masher, you can use a potato masher to like break apart the meat, because you really want like small particles. But I'm just gonna break it apart with a wooden spoon and then take my time, because anyways, you know, you just want to, because you can't really do this at too high of a heat, because you don't want to develop too much color, or any color at all, really. You can take your time to really break everything apart. What they do is they take the terrine mold, they unmold it, and then they cut it into nice, you know, square slices, and you kind of take little pieces and serve it with your bread, and it's delicious. But I don't have a terrine mold. I guess it's an investment, because I do want to make more pâté and more terrine down the line in the future. Alright, I'm gonna do a little hole. All the fat's gonna pile up in there. Grind out the spices. I'm gonna start with this. Oh, the smell! It's already starting to smell like Quebecois food. Just gonna mix in the spices, let them cook in the fat a little bit. Alright, now add our liquid. So really you can add as much milk as you want, because you want it to reduce anyway. You want it to reduce till dry. So yeah, no, it's not very glamorous looking, you know. It's like it's gray and brown, and nothing's like. But that's, you know, that's it's colonial era of food. Of course, add salt. You want this to be decently aggressively salty. Not too much, of course, because like I said, when it cools down, it becomes more intense. But you want it to be like decently salty, because this is a meat spread after all, and the salt is going to help preserve it. The salt is going to help, but it's also going to help because you know this is a spread, so you kind of want it to flavor your bread. Because bread, as delicious as it is, bread with no salt is pretty like, you know, it's semi bland. And I'm going to add a lot of black pepper. I like black pepper as a flavor in my Creton, not just in my spice mix, but I also like having the texture of it in it a little bit, just a little bit, like little bites of black pepper to add a little bit of difference to your bites. Now you want to mix thoroughly everything. I'm using a spatula because I don't want everything to spill out of my pan. It's nice to get the corners because it's flexible. And I want to hydrate the breadcrumbs. And that's also why I'm going to adjust spices later, because if it reduces a lot and therefore there's not much liquid and the spices come off too strongly because of the lack of liquid, you can't remove spice, but you can always add spice. So it's better to under spice and under salt and under pepper and then add your finishing touches right before you put it in your mold. As you can see, we're really getting there. Like, there's almost no liquid left. It's mostly just liquid fat and meat. The amount of actual like liquid is very, very low. And in fact, there's almost no steam coming off anymore. And you can also see, like, when you move it around, it's getting thicker and it's trying a little bit to stick to the bottom because there's no more liquid to kind of keep it. So at this stage, if you wanted to, you could blitz it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I'll show the color too. As you can see, whoa, it almost didn't change anything, did it? Oh no, it did. So you can see from the color, it's a very light in color. It's not particularly dark. You really don't develop any color in here. It's really just all about the concentration of flavor and removing liquid, concentration of fat. So as you can see, I just put them in these little containers. Now this is at the stage where if you wanted to, you could add clarified butter or lard at the top, create a nice even layer at the top, and that way at the same time, to make sure that you have a nice layer, it would also mean that all the lard would sink through and cover any little air pockets. But I just made sure there's no air pockets by like tapping it down and everything. But if you really want to be like super ultra mega safe, what you do, cover it with your fat and let it congeal that way. But I'm just gonna put plastic wrap and let it come to almost. You want to cool it down pretty much and let it solidify, and you'll see it becomes very stiff but still kind of like spreadable. That's the point. So I'm going to cover this with plastic just to help it keep its shape, and so that the steam doesn't build up, because I'm going to put like a lid, right? So to not have steam build up by coming down, like the steam is going to adhere to the plastic, and you put it away in your fridge like this. And you really want to eat this cold. I think it's best cold. And what's cool about it when it's cold is that when you serve it, you serve it on like warm bread, and the warmth of the bread is gonna like partially start like re-liquefying the fat, and it's just gonna kind of melt in your mouth, and it's gonna be very nice. And yeah, at this stage, either blitz it or don't. Either cover it in clarified fat or don't. I do it very simple. I don't want to make my food processor dirty. I don't want to make my I don't want to use more lard than I have to, because we don't live in the colonial times, so I don't have to preserve this, out in the open, no fridge, no nothing, where the lard is going to protect it. In this case, it doesn't need protection. It's fine. So you got your Cretons, and you just need to put them away and make sure that Mr. Kos, who is always excited by your projects, make sure that the nefarious Mr. Kos doesn't eat your Cretons. So I'm gonna let them cool down in the fridge, and we'll see. We'll eat them, and I'll show you how to eat them. So what did we learn today? Today we learned how to make Cretons. Oh, look, me and Kos get on the camera at the same time. So I come to you from the dark void where like part of my hair and part of my face is not visible because of it being night and the unnatural lighting not being the best in here. And I'm gonna show you how to eat Cretons. So it's pretty simple. You got your toasted bread, warm. It doesn't have to be toasted bread. It doesn't have to be warm, but that's what I prefer. You got your mustard, Dijon mustard, a strong English type mustard. Even Mips is interested. And you got your Creton. As you can see, the Creton holds on its own. It's pretty stiff, you know. So Mips is hiding the camera right now. But as you can see, the Creton's stiff. You know, you can cut it into chunks. And you can put it on here and go, delicious. But let's taste it on its own first. Smooth. A few chunks of meat in there that you feel you have to bite. It's spiced. It's salty. It's delicious. Not much more I can ask for. It's delicious. So the way I do it, you know, I take a piece of bread, put a little bit of Creton on it, take mustard, put a little bit of mustard on the Creton. It's delightful. This in the morning, not much more you can ask for. The spice, kind of like pungency of the mustard, it's a bit acidic. It cuts through the richness of your Creton, which are pretty fatty. I mean, by default, Creton should be pretty fatty. The toasted bread, you know, it's crisp. You got these two that are kind of smooth. Crisp with smooth, always nice contrasts. And when the bread is still warm, when you put the cold Creton on it, and it just starts to like barely melt the fat in there. So you got like the cold Creton, but you also got like a little piece. It's kind of melty, and you feel it in your mouth. It's delicious. You can't coast. No. It's just delicious, you know, like I don't know who, I mean, unless you don't like spices, like with those kind of warm colonial spices, like I don't see why you wouldn't love that. It's so like so easy to like. It's meaty, it's fatty, it's rich, creamy. With the mustard, it's just beautiful. And eating this for breakfast alongside, you know, eggs and bacon and potatoes and beans, and you got the full Quebec breakfast experience. You know, people always talk about, oh yeah, you know, the full English breakfast, or the full American. I will say, the full Quebec is probably pretty good. I don't think it exists officially, but the full Quebec, I think, will be really good. You know, you got like eggs, potentially, you know, like a puffy omelet, kind of like Sugar Shack style, but like a puffy omelet, Creton, nice toasted bread, a little bit of mustard to go your Creton on your bread. Maybe I don't know, like something with maple syrup, like maybe not pancakes. I would say crepes, or maybe like sarrasin galettes. Yeah, galette de sarrasin with maple syrup, Creton with like nice bread, mustard, eggs, beans, like maple and lard beans, you know, and maybe some mashed potatoes, so some roasted potatoes, you know, something like that. Honestly, sounds like a delicious breakfast to me. I'd have to do that one day, kind of like think up of what I would want to put in a Quebec breakfast and make a full Quebec breakfast, or whatever you want to call it. But in the meanwhile, you know, Creton, you don't have to eat. You don't have to eat with mustard. You know, you could eat with sauce gribiche, which is like I guess kind of like you could say like French tartar sauce or something, or just with tartar sauce. Honestly, it'd be really good, and it would be more consistent because of the pickles and the eggs. Like you'd have a more complete kind of like breakfast experience of just eating your Creton, your mustard, and your sauce tartar sauce, or sauce gribiche. Like, it would be more complete as far as the breakfast goes. But delicious I think it goes great with salad on the side, like a bread, croton, bit of mustard, and like a nice salad. So the salad's fresh, it's crisp, it's refreshing, and then you have this kind of heavier, more like deep, more like cooked flavors, more fat. Makes for a nice contrast. But other than that, croton, really simple. It stores in the fridge for a long time. You can freeze it and it defrosts really well. You can also serve this with black pepper on top. So like you have your croton, you have your mustard, crack some black pepper on top, you eat it with bread. I'm sure, anything that you can think of where pate would be good, this is going to be good too. And this is way easier to make than pate and a lot more cheap to make than pate. No need for liver, no need to blitz it smooth, no need to add alcohol like spirits or anything. I think croton is a nice thing for anybody to have in their arsenal and in their cooking arsenal. And the best thing about it is that it's kind of not that well known outside of Quebec, I guess. And so you can kind of show off your this is a Quebec dish. And not just that, but I think it's a pretty easy dish to like. It's not overly spiced like some other Quebec dishes. It's not, it's not organ meat or like kind of a weird preparation. I would say it's very easy to like. It's very like beginner friendly. Like if you want to get used to the kind of colonial flavor profile of that kind of food, like you want to do ragout pâte, but maybe you're intimidated. Croton is like a good introduction because you got the porky, salty, fatty with the spices, except it's less about the spices and the strong porky flavor of pork feet, and it's more about kind of the mild, creamy fattiness. So I think this is a good introduction to like the Quebec flavor profile, the early colonial flavor profile. And of course, you can experiment too. I once theorized of doing like a pseudo croton with like a different spice kind of content, where instead of putting the colonial spices, you would put like Mediterranean spices to make kind of like maybe like a kofta spice flavored like lamb croton could be pretty nice, or like a Latino kind of, like you could say, like I guess like taco meat spice croton could be pretty nice too, and you eat that with like cornbread. Oh, it'd be so good, and like a little bit of like hot sauce or something. I mean, croton with hot sauce is already delicious. I just like what mustard does. But there's so many ways you can do it. Like the spice mixture here, it's the colonial spices, but you could do whatever you want. And of course, even if you do want to go the colonial spice route, you can use any sort of ratio you want. The way I do it and the way I kind of like it is a little bit heavier on the cloves, a little bit heavier on the Jamaica pepper. But honestly, any mix could work. I'm sure with a little bit of cardamom too, it could be pretty nice. Kind of like that nutmeg, more like dessert side of the warm spices. I feel like for me at least, when you eat cardamom, it's either in Indian food or it's in desserts. So you can make like a kind of Indian style pork croton. I think it'd be really cool. But anyway, I've just been rambling about potential and possibilities and trying to sell you to eat this. But honestly, I mean, it's so simple. Make it, eat it. If you try it, let me know what you think. And if you don't try it, don't let me know what you think. And if you try it and you like it, you don't have to tell me. I mean, I just want to share food with people. Just eat to live, but also eat for fun. Obviously, you gotta have fun with it a little bit. Look, it's Mips.